Hello, from the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba. This is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. The Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela restored diplomatic relations with Honduras, following Xiomara Castro's swearing-in as the new female president of that Central American country. The first step to reestablish relationships between both nations was taken by Venezuela, with the arrival of the official delegation sent by President Nicolás Maduro to participate in the presidential inauguration ceremony. Shortly after arriving in Tegucigalpa, the head of the Venezuelan delegation, Governor of Miranda State, Héctor Rodríguez, stated that the first thing of this country would do was to send a new ambassador in order to restore political relations and the ideas of unity. Rodríguez, who was accompanied by Foreign Minister Félix Plasencia, Vice Minister Rander Peña, and the Minister of Women Margarot Godoy, announced that Godoy will be the new ambassador in Honduras.
These embassies receive intolerable conditions. Unfortunate what the farce does, what the deception does. Today we have rescued the diplomatic relations of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela with the Honduran people, with the democracy that has become president, this great woman from Latin America. Today our diplomatic relations are re-established, and together we will create a clear path for the unity of Latin America, the unity between Honduras and Venezuela, between our people. It is a wonderful moment, Governor, to rescue this moment and to break definitely with that deception. It is a day of celebration, a day of great celebration, a day of solidarity. We must remember Commander Chavez and recognize the commitments. Thanks to all.
And the newly installed president of Honduras stated her willingness to establish dialogue and her promise to defend the rights of all Honduran women and girls, especially against violence.
Places the human being in the front and above the market. We have the best disposition and spirit of dialogue. No more violence against women. I move forward with all my strength to close the gap and generate the conditions so that our girls can develop to the full and live in the country free and without violence. To the Honduras women, I am not going to fail to you. I am going to defend your rights. I'm going to defend all of your rights, and you may be sure of that. Until victory forever.
President Xiomara Castro also described the kind of state and the country she expects to achieve with her government.
Built to ensure the inhabitants of the nation the enjoyment of justice, freedom, culture, and the well-being and their economic well-being. And as a result, we have the duty to restore the economic system over the basis of transparency, efficiency in production, and social justice in the distribution of wealth and national incomes.
And the criminal section of the Constitutional Court in Colombia supported this Thursday former combatants of the extinct Armed Revolutionary Forces FARC-EP, who allege a lack of security guarantees by the state. After more than 6 hours, the court declared an unconstitutional state of affairs, which means a massive violation of rights due to the lack of security for the ex-guerrillas in the process of returning to civilian life. Likewise, this high instance of justice determined that they must adopt orders that guarantee execution of protection. According to the Observatory of Human Rights and Conflicts, 48 former FARC guerrillas reintegrated into civilian life were killed in 2021, and 299 since the signing of the peace agreements in September 2016.
The Constitutional Court, considering the high number of peace signatories who have been victims of homicide and the low level of implementation of the norms on security guarantees for demobilized combatants, also decided to declare the state of unconstitutionality and to issue general instructional orders for the full compliance with the provisions of the agreements.
In Bolivia, the government announced the relaunch of a series of projects to avoid the threat of a crisis in the energy sector, which includes hydrocarbons and lithium. Our correspondent, Freddy Morales, tells us the details.
The first Hydro Energy and Petrochemical Summit revealed the government's immediate plans to strengthen these sectors, but above all, to overcome the threat of a short-term crisis. We have called it the BS Activation Plan, which consists of the development of projects and activities related to hydrocarbon exploration. It is not unknown that production had already been falling for years, and this production, both of gas and oil, undoubtedly needed to be replaced. The plan, with exploration investments of more than $400 million, aims to renew doubling of reserves that the country recorded more than a decade ago. From 2006 to 2015, we went from 35 million to 60 million cubic meters per day. However, we can also see that from 2016 onwards until 2020, we have a decrease, and this decrease was due to an exploration policy that did not have the necessary success. The increase in natural gas reserves depends on practically consolidating the industrialization process, which already has urea and ammonia production planned to support agricultural development. It is the same as gas with urea, with given added value. When we put crude oil in a refinery and diesel and gasoline come out, we are generating added value to that crude oil, and that added value will stay with us. It will stay with YPFB refining. We will spend less money on imports. In addition to guaranteeing raw materials for industrialization, the plan contemplates extending the free natural gas connection to homes, which benefits almost half of the population with this cheap energy. In the 2021 administration, 70,000 internal systems have been installed in our homes, but you know that in 2005 we only had 55,000 systems, and that was the number of systems, 55,000 families with systems. Today Bolivia has more than 1 million installations. The government's energy program includes the industrial development of lithium from the Uyuni salt flats and the beginning of electric energy exports to neighboring countries starting this year, as well as continuing with the export of liquefied gas to Peru and Paraguay.
Thank you, Freddy, for this report, and we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Argentine President Alberto Fernandez announced a new debt repayment deal with the International Monetary Fund the day a $700 million payment was due.
I would like to announce that the government of Argentina has reached an agreement with the International Monetary Fund. Governing is an exercise in responsibility. We had a problem and now we have a solution. We had a rope around our necks, a sword of Damocles, and now we have a path we can walk. Without an agreement, we had no horizon for the future. With this agreement, we can sort out the present and build a future. In comparison with previous agreements signed by Argentina, and it is good to remember this agreement does not contemplate restrictions that would delay our development.
And young Cubans returned to the streets this Thursday to participate in the March of the Torches, a traditional parade that honors the life and work of Cuban national hero José Martí on the eve of his 169th birthday. Thousands of members of Cuba's new generations as revolutionaries marched from 8 p.m. local time from the steps of the University of Havana and ended the pilgrimage at the Fragua Martiana, where once stood the quarry where Martí did forced labor during his political imprisonment. The initiative paid tribute to the historic leader of the Cuban Revolution, Commander-in-Chief Fidel Castro Ruz, as well as the centennial generation, initiator of the last stage of the liberation process in the Caribbean nation, and also the promoter of the first March of the Torches in 1953. The parade was attended by the highest authorities of the country, the President of the Republic and the first Secretary of the Communist Party of Cuba, Miguel Díaz-Canel, as well as Raúl Castro Ruz, part of the country's historic generation. Now we move on to other topics. The United States Coast Guard said that it had recovered the bodies of 5 people from a suspected human smuggling boat that capsized last weekend off the coast of Florida, but that it will suspend its search for the more than 30 passengers who were still missing. At a news conference in Miami Beach, officials said that 4 of the 5 bodies had been found in the past day as crews searched the northern Florida Straits, and that only 1 survivor had been located earlier in the week. According to the Coast Guard, the 25-foot boat had been left Bimini in the Bahamas on Saturday night, but encountered severe weather as it approached the Florida coast, overturning about 45 miles east of the Fort Pierce Inlet. Absent the emergence of additional information that could help authorities narrow the search field, those in charge of the effort said that they had no choice but to call off the search. In the United States, a snow-covered bridge collapsed in Pittsburgh hours before President Joe Biden's scheduled visit to the Pennsylvania city to talk about his infrastructure plan. Authorities reported that 3 or 4 vehicles were on the commuter bridge, which spans over a creek in Frick Park, when it collapsed on Friday morning. 10 people suffered non-life-threatening injuries, and 3 were transported to nearby hospitals. The cause of the collapse is under investigation. According to data from Biden's administration, the president is scheduled to promote his bipartisan infrastructure law, which is set to provide $1.63 billion to Pennsylvania in federal funding for bridges alone, the 3rd highest figure for any state. Pennsylvania has more than 3,000 bridges in poor condition, the 2nd most after Iowa. In a press conference, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stated Moscow doesn't want war, but will not allow its interests to be ignored.
If it depends on Russia, there will be no war. We do not want wars, but neither will we allow for our interests to be blatantly violated, for our interests to be ignored. The response from the US was almost an example of diplomatic propriety. The NATO one was so full of ideology and was written with North Atlantic Alliance's exceptionalism that I was a wee bit ashamed for the people who wrote these texts.
Italian political leaders agreed on Friday to speed up voting for the post of president after days of deadlock that has paralyzed Prime Minister Mario Draghi's government. 4 rounds of voting in Parliament since Monday have failed to produce anything close to a winner, with most lawmakers casting blank ballots or abstaining due to a lack of agreement between the parties. Due to coronavirus restrictions, Parliament had scheduled only 1 round of voting per day until now. Draghi, a former European Central Bank chief brought into lead to a national unity government almost a year ago, remains in the running to be elected the new head of state. But there is widespread concern his departure as prime minister could destabilize the government at a critical time and even spark snap elections, which few parties want. And China said on Friday it opposed any form of official interaction between the U.S. and Taiwan after their vice presidents had an exchange at the inauguration of Honduras' new president, Xiomara Castro.
Just a province of China, so there is no so-called vice president for a province. China has always opposed any form of official interaction between the U.S. and Taiwan. Lai Ching-te claims to be someone who works pragmatically for the Taiwan independence. He repeatedly made remarks on Taiwan independence and stubbornly adhered to the creed of Taiwan independence. The U.S. should abide by the One China principle and the provisions of the 3 Sino-U.S. joint communiques, take seriously China's position and concern, stop any form of official contact with Taiwan, and not send any wrong signal to the Taiwan independence forces.
China's foreign ministry also condemned a U.S. order that banned China Unicom from operating in the country on national security concerns, calling it an act of abusing state power.
The U.S. once again revoked the permit of a Chinese company on the ground of national security, but without providing any specific or illegal behavior in the U.S. It is a blatant overstretching of the concept of national security and abusing of state power to suppress Chinese companies. This seriously undermines international trade rules and harms the rights and interests of global consumers, including those in the U.S. The Chinese government supports relevant businesses to safeguard their rights according to law and will continue to take necessary measures to resolutely protect their interests.
North Korea confirmed launches of 4 missiles this week as Kim Jong-un ramped up weapons testing to a record pace in an effort to signal displeasure with the United States over economic sanctions. The tests included the launch of 2 long-range cruise missiles on Tuesday that flew for more than 1,000 kilometers. The official Korean Central News Agency confirmed that will represent North Korea's longest flight by a cruise missile. North Korea also launched 2 missiles on Thursday to confirm its ability to fire conventional warheads on surface-to-surface systems. South Korea had said earlier that projectiles were likely short-range ballistic missiles, which the United States in the United Nations has banned Pyongyang from launching due to their ability to carry nuclear warheads. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. In Ethiopia, nearly 40% of people in Tigray are suffering an extreme lack of food in the face of an extended de facto blockade of the war-hit region. Likewise, humanitarian groups are forced to curtail activities because of fuel and supply shortages, with aid having to be delivered by foot. The data was included by the first reliable food security assessment and estimated that 4.6 million people in Tigray, or 83% of the population, were food insecure, 2 million of them severely so. Diets are increasingly impoverished as food items become unavailable, and families rely almost exclusively on cereals, while limiting portion size on the number of meals that they eat each day to make whatever food is available stretch forward.
Severe hunger is tightening its grip on northern Ethiopia. After 15 months of conflict, almost 40% of Tigrayans are suffering an extreme lack of food. Meanwhile, across all 3 conflict-affected regions of the north, an estimated 9 million people are in need of humanitarian food assistance, the highest number yet.
The illegal U.S. military presence on Syrian soil is an occupation that, in addition to providing support to Daesh terrorists and separatist militias, commits war crimes and crimes against humanity against the Syrian people. This is denounced by Damascus and its allies Russia, China and Iran, who demand an immediate and unconditional withdrawal of these invading troops from the Syrian territories. With more details, our correspondent Hisham Wanus.
In addition to denouncing on Thursday, January 27th, that there is no legal justification for the U.S. presence on Syrian soil, the Military Prosecutor General's office affirmed that it has convincing evidence of U.S. sponsorship of Daesh terrorists and the separatist militias' divisive plan of the so-called Syrian Democratic Forces, and that such evidence allows to prove accusations against the U.S. administration, a position endorsed by China and Iran, countries that are demanding before the UN and its Security Council an end to the U.S. occupation of some parts of Syria. The United States did not obtain the approval of the Syrian Arab Republic for this presence, nor it is in a position of self-defense. Therefore, this presence violates the text of the 4th clause of the 2nd article of the United Nations Charter, and despite the anti-terrorist propaganda, the facts and documents prove the relationship between the U.S. and the Daesh terrorist organization. At the same time, Moscow called for an urgent meeting of the Security Council on recent developments in northeastern Syrian city of Haska. Moscow denounced that Washington orchestrated the escape of hundreds of Daesh terrorists from a prison under the control of the separatist militia, bombed the city and caused the displacement of thousands of its inhabitants under the pretext of pursuing the fugitive extremists. Syria and its allies condemned a new attempt to revive this terrorist entity to justify the illegal U.S. military presence in the area.
The bombing and the fighting did not stop all night, and immediately at dawn we fled the house with our children. While the shooting continued, and we arrived at this center where we were sheltered and given food and gills to sleep on and everything we needed. We fled our homes fearing for the life of our children from the bombings and the fighting that caused us a state of panic and a shortage of food, water and other basic needs, which endanger our life and life of our little children.
Meanwhile, in spite of the denunciations of Damascus and its allies, the United States and its Kurdish Arab affiliates of the Syrian Democratic Forces, in a blatant violation of international law, the UN Charter of Principles and the sovereignty and independence of Syria, occupy under the argument of fighting Daesh almost 70% of the country's oil wells, remove its crude oil and agricultural crops, make its people suffer and hinder any possible political solution to the crisis in Syria.
FTS Damascus, Syria.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.